It is back. Same region, same fault system, same zone that already produced the largest earthquake of 2026. And now Tonga is shaking again. A magnitude 5.5 has just struck. And before you think, okay, 5.5, that is not so big, I need you to stop right there. Because the number alone tells you almost nothing. The location tells you everything, and the timing tells you something that I think is genuinely important and genuinely concerning. Because this is not a random earthquake in a random place. This is the same scar on the same fault that already tore open once this year in the most powerful seismic event the planet has produced in all of 2026, and it just moved again. So let me give you the full picture, because if you only read the headline and move on, you will miss what is actually happening beneath the Pacific Ocean right now. Tonga sits in the southwestern Pacific. Beautiful islands, flat, low-lying, surrounded by deep open ocean. A place most people associate with turquoise water and remoteness. But beneath that surface, beneath that postcard image, sits one of the most violent and extreme tectonic environments on the entire planet. The Tonga Kermadec subduction zone. This is the structure that controls everything happening in this region seismically. And I want you to understand what this subduction zone actually is, because most coverage of Tonga earthquakes skips over this completely, and it is the most important part of the story. The Tonga Kermadec Trench is the second deepest oceanic trench on Earth. It plunges to over 10,800 meters depth. That is more than 35,400 feet below sea level. Deeper than Mount Everest is tall. And along this trench, the Pacific Plate is diving beneath the Indo-Australian Plate at a speed that is almost hard to believe, up to 24 centimeters per year. That is the fastest subduction rate on the entire planet. Let that sink in for a moment. While most tectonic plates move at the pace of a growing fingernail, the Pacific Plate here is plunging downward at nearly a quarter of a meter every single year. That means stress is not just building along this boundary. It is being manufactured at an extraordinary rate. It is being loaded into the fault system faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. And when that stress releases, when the fault finally slips, it releases with a violence that matches the rate at which it was loaded. That is why the largest earthquake of 2026 happened here. And that is why a magnitude 5.5 in the same region, in the same fault system right now, is not something to scroll past. Now I need to talk about what the largest quake of 2026 actually did to this system, because this is the context that makes this new 5.5 so significant. When a major earthquake ruptures a fault, it does not simply release all the stress and leave everything calm and reset. It redistributes stress. It changes the pressure loading on adjacent fault segments. It can bring neighboring sections of the fault closer to their own failure threshold. Scientists call this Coulomb stress transfer. The rupture on one part of the fault pushes stress onto the parts that did not rupture. Those adjacent segments now have a higher probability of producing their own earthquakes. So when the largest earthquake of 2026 tore through the Tonga region, it did not just release energy, it reorganized the stress field across the entire surrounding fault network. It essentially nudged every nearby fault segment closer to its own breaking point. And now one of those segments just moved. Magnitude 5.5, same region, same system. Is this an aftershock? Technically speaking, in the months following a major earthquake, any seismicity in the same region that is smaller in magnitude than the main shock is classified as an aftershock. So yes, by definition, this is an aftershock sequence event. But here is what people get wrong about aftershocks. They assume aftershocks are just the earth calming down, just the system settling, just residual trembling from a wound that is already healing. That is not always what aftershocks are. Aftershocks can be magnitude 5, 6, even 7. They can cause their own damage. They can trigger their own secondary effects. And in a subduction zone like Tonga Kermadec, where the fault system is extraordinarily complex, where multiple fault segments intersect, where the plate geometry creates stress concentrations in multiple directions simultaneously, aftershock sequences can be prolonged, unpredictable, and occasionally produce earthquakes that rival or approach the magnitude of the original main shock. We saw this in other major subduction zones. After the 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan, the aftershock sequence produced earthquakes above magnitude 7. After the 2010 Chile earthquake, the aftershocks included events above magnitude 6 for months afterward. These are not just whispers after a shout. They are real earthquakes with real hazard potential. And in Tonga right now, the sequence is still active. I want to talk about the tsunami dimension of this because with Tonga, you cannot discuss seismicity without discussing tsunami risk. The geography here demands it. These are low-lying Pacific islands surrounded by deep ocean, the same ocean that in January 2022 transmitted a tsunami generated by the Hunga Ha'apai volcanic eruption to coastlines across the entire Pacific basin. Waves were detected in Japan, in the United States, in South America, from an eruption in Tonga. That event demonstrated something that scientists already knew, but the world was reminded of dramatically. This region can generate ocean-crossing hazards. The deep surrounding waters, the steep underwater slopes, the active fault geometry, all of it creates conditions where the right earthquake in the right location with the right fault mechanism can produce a tsunami that is not just a local problem, it is a Pacific-wide problem. Now, a magnitude 5.5 on its own does not generate a destructive tsunami. The energy release is not sufficient to displace enough water column to create significant wave heights at distant coastlines. But a magnitude 5.5 is a data point in an ongoing sequence, and if that sequence produces a larger event, a 6.5, a 7.0, something with a thrust mechanism that lifts the seafloor vertically, the tsunami calculus changes immediately. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center monitors this region continuously. Every significant earthquake in the Tonga Kermadec zone gets evaluated for tsunami potential in real time. That monitoring exists precisely because the history of this region demands it. And right now, the history is repeating itself, quietly, incrementally, but repeating. Let me talk about the volcanic dimension as well, because in Tonga, you genuinely cannot separate the seismic story from the volcanic story. They are the same story told by the same earth process. The subduction that drives these earthquakes, the Pacific plate diving beneath the Indo-Australian plate at 24 centimeters per year, that same process generates magma. As the subducting plate descends into the hot mantle, it releases water and other volatiles into the overlying mantle wedge. That lowers the melting point of the mantle rock. The rock melts. The magma rises through the overlying plate, and it feeds the volcanoes that line the Tonga Arc. Hunga Ha'apai is the most dramatic recent example, an underwater volcano in this arc that in January 2022 produced the largest atmospheric explosion recorded in the modern instrumental era. The pressure wave from that eruption circled the Earth multiple times. It was detected by barometers on every continent. The tsunami it generated was caused not by seafloor displacement from an earthquake, but by the atmospheric pressure wave itself, a mechanism that scientists had theorized but never observed at this scale before. That volcano is still being monitored carefully. Its behavior after the 2022 eruption, the rebuilding of the edifice, the hydrothermal activity, the relationship between ongoing seismicity in the region and the volcanic system's recovery. All of it is part of the picture that scientists are tracking right now as this new seismic activity unfolds. Because a major earthquake in the Tonga region does not just shake the ground, it changes pressures in the volcanic systems that share the same tectonic roots. The same subducting plate that loads the fault also feeds the volcanoes. When the fault moves, when stress is redistributed, the magmatic systems respond. Not always dramatically, not always immediately, but the connection between seismicity and volcanism in the Tonga Arc is real and documented. I researched the specific fault geometry around the epicentral region of the largest 2026 earthquake and this new 5.5 to understand what part of the system is still active. The Tonga Kermadec subduction zone is not a single clean fault plane. It is a complex system with the main subduction interface, secondary faults within the overriding plate, outer rise faults in the subducting plate seaward of the trench, and transform faults along the arc. Each of these structures has its own stress history, its own accumulated strain, its own potential for future rupture, and the largest 2026 earthquake loaded stress onto all of them simultaneously when it ruptured. The 5.5 that just occurred tells us at minimum one thing with certainty. The fault system is still adjusting. It has not finished its response to the main shock. The stress redistribution is ongoing. The sequence is alive. And in a subduction zone that moves at 24 centimeters per year, in a fault system capable of producing the largest earthquake of 2026, an active ongoing sequence is not something you watch casually. Now, what do we watch going forward? This is always the most important question. Does the magnitude of events in this sequence show any trend? If the aftershock magnitudes are gradually decreasing over time, that is consistent with a normal aftershock decay pattern and is a relatively reassuring signal. But if we see magnitude spikes, if a 5.5 is followed by a 6.0 or a 6.5, that deviation from the expected decay would demand immediate attention. Where exactly are these earthquakes locating? Are they all clustering tightly around the main shock rupture zone, or are they migrating? If hypocenters start appearing in new locations, if the seismicity is spreading along strike of the subduction zone toward new fault segments, that migration pattern is a red flag. What does the focal mechanism look like for this 5.5? Is it a thrust event consistent with the main subduction interface, or does it show a different fault geometry suggesting a secondary fault structure has activated? The difference matters enormously for tsunami assessment and for understanding which part of the system is responding, and is there any change in the volcanic monitoring signals anywhere along the Tonga Arc. Given the tectonic connection between the earthquakes and the volcanic systems, any uptick in hydrothermal or volcanic activity at any of the arc volcanoes in the weeks following this sequence would be significant. Guys, I have been tracking the Tonga region closely since the largest earthquake of 2026 struck earlier this year. And I have to tell you, this new 5.5 in the same region is not surprising to me scientifically. Aftershock sequences in major subduction zones persist for months to years, but it is a reminder, a pointed, direct reminder that this fault system has not gone back to sleep. The fastest subduction zone on Earth, the second deepest trench on the planet, the region that produced the largest earthquake of 2026, and it is shaking again. Same place, same fault, right now. I am staying on this for you. Every update from USGS, every Pacific Tsunami Warning Center bulletin, every new data point from this sequence, I will be watching. Check the end screen for more on this region and what has already happened here this year. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Bye-bye.